So, hello everyone, and welcome to the final session of the 2024 Australian CFO Summit. Really hoping you've all had a great day so far. While people are shuffling in and filing into the chat, I would love you guys to all put in what is the top destination of your travel bucket list. Again, guys, don't be shy. I want to know what your aspirations are for traveling.
I mean, I'm going to go with Lake Como, but that's a pipe dream if I can ever get off the tools.
That's pretty dreamy. Well, a lot of Italy here. I can see a theme forming. Boccare, Japan. Yeah, Japan as well. There's a kind of fighting for #1 spot here.
Nice. Key West and Florida, highly recommend. Fantastic spot.
Amsterdam, Bhutan. That's a different one. I like that. William's gone for whole of Europe. Fair enough. He's smart, cover it all. Oh, and Jacob has Dubbo. Fair enough. Oh, Moscow, really? That's a good one. I wonder if that will open back up in our lifetimes. Hopefully.
Maybe.
Yeah. Nice. Some good locations in here. Appreciate the ambition everyone's got. For me personally, it's actually not on Earth. I would love to go to space before I die. So very much need Richard Branson, Elon Musk to get themselves together. Cool. So we will get started. Quick introduction of myself, shameless plug. My name is Risha. I'm a customer success manager here at Wheel. If you're not familiar with Wheel, we are the leading spend management platform in Australia, and our focus is on helping finance teams streamline their back office admin. Now, our sponsors today, we could not do it without our wonderful sponsors. So a big thank you to all of our partners that you can see on the screen. That is CFO Magazine, Visa, Fathom, Mayday, Translucent, and Trace. Promise we're almost there, but I want to do a bit of housekeeping before we get stuck into the good stuff. Sure, all of you have heard this enough times today, but just a quick one. This is really important to us for this session to be interactive, the whole day to be interactive. So if you have something that you want to share, a thought, an idea, please use the chat function or use the Q&A function to ask a question. I'll then pose your questions to Tyler and Daniel throughout today's session. All right, smashing. So I'm now going to hand over to the wonderful Tyler Caskey and Daniel Fu. Both are partners at the Bean Counters. Tyler has been a CFO many times over, and he's actually returning to the CFO Summit for a 3rd year running. Here to walk us through fastest month-end close, while Daniel's background is in treasury and governance across Asia Pacific. So you're in extremely wise and well-accomplished hands. Tyler and Daniel, welcome to the Australian CFO Summit.
Thanks, Risha.
Yeah.
Nice. And we're talking about our favorite topic for Daniel and I. I'm not sure if it's because we're hate doing manual tasks or hate wasting time, doing, basic reporting. But, we're here to try to help you do a month-end close, and if you can, on day one. So that's our goal. If we hit the first slide, I'll just introduce myself, then hand to Dan. So the Bean Counters, we're a team of about 9 people here in Sydney, Australia. And we really try to help businesses scope and implement systems. And, that can be anything from moving to Xero, the Xero apps. We help a lot with payroll, HR, expense management. And then also really looking at those moments, sometimes when businesses get too big for Xero and they need to consolidate and move up to NetSuite or and such. But, we try to stay in the Xero ecospace if we can. And we also try to help businesses automate what they've currently got. So, this really plays into the month-end close. It's not just about like changing systems. It's also about like doing better with the systems you've got. Some are like anchors that you need to stay with. And then one of the things Dan and I have both got into over the last 6 years is utilizing Power BI reporting to stop yourself as a head of finance or an accountant industry making reports and sending them, is to automate that sending onto people's phones, tablets, or laptops. A bit about myself. I was in public practice for about 9 years at KPMG, Deloitte, and a business called Rothsay, predominantly in business services, tax and compliance, but just always had a love of tech. Did my time as a financial controller, as a CFO, a lot of time in IT businesses, recruitment and design, and it really helps, understand like how each industry, um, can be better. And the goals today is to take a lot of that knowledge and help it apply to each industry and break down some of the norms, especially around billing. A lot of people are like, oh, billing takes 5 days to close, so month end has to be day 6. And then, my real passion, outside of basketball is really trying to, make finance teams more efficient so they can add a bit more value. Dan, over to you.
Yep, cool. Yeah, just next slide. So as Tyler mentioned, I'm also a partner here at the Bean Counters. So spewing the comments that Tyler's been mentioned from before, but just a little bit of background on myself. I also was in public practice for about 4 years, and I was all spent in external audit at Deloitte. So a lot of like technical knowledge which I kind of learned from there. And after that, I moved into industry in various different roles, from treasury roles, financial controller, and CFO over the last 10 or so years. I've been fortunate enough to work in a lot of various companies and company structures, from Aussie listed businesses to multinational listed businesses to multinational privately owned and private equity owned businesses, as well as more local PE owned and private business here in Australia. And they span across multiple industries as well. So energy and utilities, fast moving consumer goods. I did a stint at a tech, medical devices, as well as manufacturing.
And how did you like PE, mate, working in private equity?
Love it. Love their demanding reporting requirements. Is probably one way to put it. So you guys would see definitely a lot of my hints, or a lot of my opinions are around streamlining that as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. No matter what ownership structure you've got, like the goal here is to automate the reporting for those stakeholders. We're not trying to do a cookie cutter approach. We're trying to make sure that this applies to, single founder owned businesses as well as private equity backed.
Yeah, listed, absolutely. So I'd like to think of myself like I was in the trenches. I was doing all the painful things over the last 10 years. So any sort of insight that I can give you guys, I'm happy to do it here.
Excellent. Let's hit that next slide, Nick. And so the person that got me onto day one month end close, which I've been doing since 2007, with a $55 million law firm with 400 staff down in Melbourne. And our fastest month end close was midday on day one. And it all was because of there's an American author named Stephen Bragg. And if anyone's got their phone on them, his podcast is incredibly dry. It's got about 160 episodes of accounting how-tos, but it's called Accounting Best Practice, and it's free. And episodes 16 to 25 are a detailed version. I'm talking detailed, like tens of hours, about how to streamline the month-end close. And Stephen always came about it from the approach of looking backwards is low value work for a finance team. To really add value to a business, you need to go forwards. The picture in the middle is him and his wife in New Zealand, my home country. He's a very passionate person about accounting. If we hit that next slide, what we want to talk here is about like why we go with the fast close. And I always put there, can you do it in under 1 day? And for me, it was, I don't want to spend 5 out of my 22 days looking at backwards results and preparing for like reports in a month, a board report that, is sometimes due by the 15th of the month. My goal was always to try to get those reports out as fast and as accurate as I could on day one. And then, really get back to like improving the operations of the business, improving the finance team, and helping actually add to the sales lines. Dan, like what was your experience going through like month-end pain?
Yeah, probably not, I'm preaching to the choir here in terms of this, but when you're in industry and you're in that kind of accounting role, what you do tend to feel is that, you're rolling from month end to month end. By the time you finish doing one month end, you're starting to do the next month end. And that ongoing, that kind of like rolling pain just doesn't help you, get up in the morning to kind of go to work anymore. So when, Tyler's pushing all these like finish your work or finish your month in one day, that gives you so much more. And I saw that point there was on the slide saying the rule of 22, where there's, you know, on average 22 working days in a month. If you can get your report out on work day one, that's 21 extra days, which you can be working on projects, transactions, anything that the business can throw at you. So it's really like relieving that and getting that pain point out of your day.
Yeah, and the two bottom points there are like my passion. Like Dan and I like look at live reporting, and Dan's in the, mate, you're in the about 6 month mark of a Power BI project with a client, it's an international client that wants, you know, live daily reporting on all their metrics, from time entries to invoicing to receipts to all that type of stuff. And the reason they want that is to break away month-end close reporting from day-to-day metric reporting. So I look at systems like Xero, systems like Wheel, you know, have really upped the game on how much more efficient we can be as a finance team. Like, one of the things I actually really like is if I spend money on Wheel, it doesn't on a Saturday, it won't come through Monday at 12, you know, midday. It'll actually be in my Xero for me to code on Sunday or Monday 5 a.m. or whatever it is. So systems like Xero Wheel actually enable the businesses to make decisions better if you stay on top of the churn. And that's something that I think is going to happen. We're going to be moving away from our 5 days of active. Banks are going to start opening up their time frames. And then also, like, ever since about 2018, when I moved a design business to Xero, my CEO was starting to review expenses all through the month and questioning about it. So like, what it made us do is by 10 o'clock each day, we had to have all our bank transactions coded. And I'm up in Gold Coast at the moment on a conference, and the founder of Culture Kings was here, and they listed an IPO at something like 600 million. They were doing daily P&Ls, right? And he was doing 4 things: sales, COGS, or sales costs of goods for the clothes, staff costs, and then marketing. And so if the marketing spend worked on Facebook ads, he would increase the ads. If the marketing spend didn't, he would change it. And so that's where the market is going.
Yeah.
All right.
Just to add to that, I think there's an immense security uptick in that as well. You're no longer kind of having to wait till the end of the month to see, heaven forbid, if there's a fraudulent transaction on a user card. You can see that same day with these systems now. So you're able to catch things much, much sooner and address them on the spot, rather than a user coming to you and saying, hey, I have no idea what this is. I don't remember if I made this spend or not.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Risha, because like one of the biggest pain points of like the last 10 years that I've noticed in the industry is that, you know, a big reason of why there is such a slow month-end close process is people are frantically fixing things that are coded wrong, or trying to figure out why things are whether things are missing or not. This live reporting that Tyler's talking about essentially means that you can stay on top of that throughout the month, so that come end of month, you're only looking at 2 or 3 days worth of work, and then you can close straight after that.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I'll hit a question at the moment, and you know, like it's from Sarah about, you know, how do you do end of month really fast if you're like reliant on timesheets? And I've gone through, dear Lord, like 20 month end kind of process breaks. You know, I walk into a business and I tell everyone, hey, within 6 months, we're going to be on day 1 month end reporting. And their finance team are like, no way, there's no chance. Timmy doesn't get our bills until 8. Or like timesheets aren't in by then. And so I always just back everything up. And I look at 2 functions. Is the system good enough so people can do live data? So if you're waiting on timesheets, then timesheets should probably be in on a daily basis. Our team does timesheets. And if people don't enter their timesheets in on a daily basis, Dan, what type of emails do they, or Teams messages do they get from me?
Yeah, very, very animated.
And so, Sarah, it's really about controlling the facets outside of your team. We're definitely going to talk about that, about, you know, making sure stakeholders are engaged, and also not sweating the small stuff. If I've got 95% of my timesheets in, I'm just going to close the books, right? And I'll let that 5% roll month on month. All right, if we hit the next slide. So what we're going to hope to share with you is about like how to hunt out and destroy manual processes. Like the goal here is anything that is manually done, we're going to see if we can automate it. We're going to look at how we can stagger the change. And then this is the point you've always talked about to me about is like when to be perfect. Like, do you want to give me an example of like things that you are always perfect on a month end and things that you let roll?
Yeah, so the way I like to see it is, you know, sometimes depending on your business and what's there, like you may only need to be perfect once a year. Year-end financial close, at the end of the year is probably when you need to be as close to perfect as possible. For other type of things, and it depends on your stakeholders, maybe you only need to be accurate to a quarter basis or a 6 monthly basis. It's looking at your entire processes and finding out where the bottlenecks are. And I'm making a call where if it doesn't need to be perfect, you're using materiality as a big driver to making sure that you know, if it's not a material balance, it's not something that's going to swing wildly on a month-to-month basis. Simplify it, book an accrual, let it run, catch it up next month. All these things that you need to look for to kind of shorten your time period.
Absolutely. For me, it was always like my wage accruals. If I was in a weekly or fortnightly business, if I did my last payroll for the month, I would do my wage accrual for say the 3 unpaid days then. So like the ability to get a perfect accrual in just doesn't matter. Like if we're talking, you know, if our wage bill is $100,000 gross every single week, and I've got 4 undays paid, I'm going to book like 60 grand, and I'm not going to book 62,512. I'm going to book 62,000. I'm going to book 61,000. In my time as CFO and financial controller, I have never been asked ever by a board member, you know, what was the exact amount to the dollar of my wage accrual. They just don't care, right? I do think you've got to look at trends and you've got to be able to explain it, but I think that perfection there is just not needed. And the last point there is about how to deliver reports that matter. And Dan and I are going to kind of talk deep into that. The two things I do to make sure I've got good reports, and Dan, I'll get you to touch on your P&L one.
Yep.
I make sure I've got an absolutely rock solid balance sheet. And I know this is like accounting nerdy, but the amount of businesses I walked into that didn't do balance sheet recs. So they just, if you don't have a good handle on your balance sheet, then you're not going to have a good handle on the P&L. So, you know, I always say you need verification at every single month of at least the major accounts. And, you know, like whenever I come into a business, I look at the quality of those. Like, are your prepayments up to date? Are your accruals, do you have verification or like logic there for the accruals? You know, and even down to the basics, like is your balance sheet, you know, bank recs accurate, and is your GST matched to your most recent BAS return? And if anyone wants a copy of our balance sheet rec templates, I've been creating them and making them since 2001 at KPMG. So I'm more than welcome to email me on LinkedIn at Tyler Caskey. I'll shoot you them across. And then I've also got cash flow templates as well. So for me, I move cash flow reporting outside of month end. Cash flow reporting is a daily process for us. Dan and I used to run this for AGL, and we've taken our own template and we've customized it to mid-sized businesses that turn into daily cash flow reporting that effectively replaces any cash flow in the month end. Again, if you want a copy of those, reach out on LinkedIn and we'll shoot you a copy.
Yeah, and I've got some P&L templates that I'd love to share with you guys. So reach out to me again on LinkedIn, and we'll shoot them across. They're just really simple templates that all businesses should have, that should be easy to replicate, tweak based on your specific business. And as well, it allows you to empower your finance team to check the P&Ls as well, so that they too can check their work before it gets up to management.
And Dan, your P&Ls are effectively for your month-end reporting. Those are effectively a structure on how to structure your group of expenses, right? Like, correct if I'm wrong, but you're doing like employee expenses first, usually because they're the highest.
Absolutely. It's structuring both just the view as well as like how you should have your default templates, so that when you every month then when you flash them up, my expectation is that you can generate these reports very quickly out of Xero, out of NetSuite, out of whatever kind of ERP you're using. have it on a page on a screen in front of you, and within 5 minutes, if you're a finance manager, finance controller, senior accountant, all the way down to an assistant accountant, you can look at that and straight away tell, oh, did I miss an accrual? Did I miss an invoice? Did something get missed throughout this month?
Yeah, nice.
Super valuable. Question in the chat from Mark. What is your guys' take on the cash flow projection in Xero?
Yeah, I don't touch it at all. Cash flow is too, like cash flow is in my brain if I'm a CFO. Like within 6 months, I always think I probably know the cash flow inside and out of the business, at founder level because I've been touching and looking at every day. But Mark, there is a really good report in Xero that doesn't get used, and I just pulled it up. It's called the cash summary report. So we use the cash summary report as the basis for our backwards looking cash flow. And it's just a really nice report of sales amount, that has come in, expenses, then you've got fixed assets, GST collected, GST paid, and shows in a really simple way the movements of cash in the business. Yeah, thanks, Risha. I think that's an underutilized report. But going forward, projection, we do daily predictions of
Yeah, and cash flow is a thing. It's more of an art than a science. It's all
Yes.
about modeling. So it really kind of depends on the sophistication of your business. But I've always gotten away with an Excel model, and this template that Tyler has it worked for a multi-billion-dollar business, energy and utilities. So if it works there, it should generally work most places.
Excellent. Let's hit that next slide. So we're going to take you through our 4-step process and how to improve your finance function. And then we're going to get into the real nitty-gritties of the month-end process that is detailed in Stephen Bragg's podcast and book. So Dan and I, every time we look at a business, we look at 4 stages for the CFO. So what can the CFO simplify? What can processes and reports can they eradicate? What manual tasks can they automate? And then what tasks are they currently doing that they can delegate? And typically that takes, for me, it's about a 12-month process until I've completely delegated my role. Because in my opinion, a CFO should technically be doing nothing. Like you shouldn't walk in and have any churn. So we'll go through these 4 steps and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. We hit the next page. So Dan, I know you're the simplification master here, mate. So you kick off with this one.
Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward in terms of the idea, right? So like you said, you can be as sophisticated as you want in terms of your calculation, your accruals, getting everything down to the perfect cent, or you can use materiality, your experience as a finance leader to essentially make judgment calls or management adjustments or management judgments to essentially close your numbers. One good example is when I was at a medical device company, they had a really complicated excess and obsolescence accrual that they created and did every month.
What type of accrual?
They call it excess and essentially it's a provision for excess and obsolescence provision for stock.
Of a machine. So if an MRI machine goes down or something like that, or gets
Actually,
made
it's
obsolete.
more medical device, like actual to the point where it's devices as well as like things like titanium screws. So you've got like stock items. So you're talking billions of SKUs across multiple, across your inventory stuff. What they essentially did was, as part of the standard, and what was kind of clear with the auditors was that each of these items, it's not as simple as aging a titanium screw. You had to look at historical sales, potential sales, and how that would impact the balance that you had at a particular end of month. It was a simple case of just looking at that. They were creating this really complicated calculation that was done every month that would require sales reports, stock reports, WIP reports, everything that was kind of flying through, which is very slow to essentially generate. It took them 5 days to get that calculation together for them to book that journal on the 6th day. So we just kind of slowed down that entire month then. What I did was
waste of time.
Waste of time. You absolutely need to do it on year end. You absolutely need to do it on half year end when you've got you're reporting out to the market. But in those in between months, you've got those other 11 or 10 other months throughout the year where you can do a simple aging report on the stock items, which I did there. We did a comparison with the sophisticated calculation and the variance was 5%. We made that 5% materiality and moved on.
And that's the key. Like if you've got something that's like, oh, this takes 5 days, I first thing I do is I just round it to the nearest $1,000, see how wrong I am, and then like, you know, just really see how accurate you actually need to be. I always think about like the 95% rule. There's a question there from Desi about, one email inbox for invoices. And yes, I typically recommend like all my invoices from suppliers coming to, accounts at, thebeancounters.com.au, just to keep it really nice and simple. You can, for queries, I do try to have one email inbox. I like that to be monitored, my whole team to have access. So I try to keep it simple if I can. I don't like having too many. But the point there I really want to touch on is watch what your team does. So I remember one of my team members was doing payroll and she was complaining that it was like just taking so long. So I was like, she went on holiday and I just did the payroll. And I was like, oh, we just haven't done our payroll check right? So I tried to automate the process. So for any finance leaders or people looking to improve the process, anything that your team does, just once a month, once a quarter, do their job for half a day. Do one of the processes they do. If they're doing 30 bills or invoices to clients per month, do one bill and just really touch that process and see if you can make that more automated. Let's hit that next slide. So this one for me is really, really good, which is eradicate. What processes do you not need to do? I came into a business that was doing provision journals for about $21. It was a $1 million mining business. And they were doing leave provision journals for, under $100. I was like, this is so irrelevant. Like, don't worry about this. But then on the other side, I look at not doing a report. So we all know the hack that if you can not send a report, you might save yourself 3 hours a week. And I always think about this. If you delay sending a report, or maybe don't send it 1 week, see who complains, and then ask them when and how they use it. I'm not going to professionally advise you to do that, but it's a nice hack in how to minimize workflow. Dan, what do you do on the eradication there?
Exact same thing. Like eradicate is essentially saving time, getting rid of the entire process, make life easier for everybody. I remember when I was at a tech business, the business when I joined that firm, they were doing 3 pay runs a month. So it's kind of like the one at the beginning, they're doing one at the beginning of the month, one in the middle of the month, and one at the end of the month. I was a bit confused because everyone was on a monthly salary. Everyone got paid technically in the middle of the month. They were all on 2 weeks arrears, 2 weeks in advance in terms of payment. The payroll officer was just doing it because a previous controller told her to do it, to pick up anything like, people, new starters, early leavers, or like hires and fires of the business, and making sure we capture them within month. I just jumped in there. I was like, why are you spending an extra 3 days or 6 days, 3 days for the first one, 6 days, 3 days for the end of month, doing so many pay runs? Just do once a month. And we pick up all the hires and fires in the subsequent monthly period.
That's a key, man. Like if I can go from a weekly payroll to a monthly payroll, or if I can go from 3 payrolls to 1 payroll, absolute no-brainer, right? Like in every single one of these 1%ers, you can save so much time.
Absolutely. And the process is the same, right? You're generating a payroll for, let's say, 50 people. We're generating a payroll for 3. You still got to get the same amount of admin. You got to click the same amount of things. Kill that process completely, eradicate it, and your team will love you for it.
Yeah, I like that. And my other hack, this one is, I cannot stress this enough. If you're a financial controller or a CFO, or someone delivering the reports, anything your team sends, they either need to copy you in or you send them at the start. One is it helps ensure quality, but 2, you can realize, I tell my team, hey, if anyone asks you for something, you have to let me know that it's happening. And the reason for that is because they often go, oh, Timmy up in Brisbane asked me for this report, so I have to do it. Whereas maybe that could be a company-wide report, or we could automate that in Power BI. So if I haven't got visibility, I can't eradicate it. And if I haven't got visibility, I can't automate it as well. All right, let's hit the next slide there. So I think this is our favorite one, right? This is where Dan and I make our, our biggest changes into businesses. And, you know, we're really talking about the automation piece. And I'll touch on some of the questions there from Andrew and Travis in this one as well. But for me, I always look at this magic number of 9 out of 10 transactions should be automatically coded. And this is where something like Wheel is a game changer. So the most painful thing for me as a CFO was a guy named Nick in Perth who entertained all the time and would send his receipts 5 days late for his Amex. And my team were always catching up. And we used to use Receipt Bank back in the day and we're doing this painful matching. If you can use a system like Wheel, you know, and there's other competitors in the market, it really just means use something like deal or don't just be on credit cards. Like the more you can automate your spending, the better you are. Typically, your invoices are going to be matching. You're going to do it out of the system. But utilizing Wheel, the approvals, the budgets, has absolutely, like, it changed our business. And myself, I travel every single month for work. And if I had to come back and do like my own travel expenses, I think I would probably throw my laptop out the window. It's just not fun. And it creates risk and it creates a to-do list in my head. Whereas using Wheel means our books are accurate each day and I don't have to spend hours, you know, doing those. And then it just matches in Xero perfectly.
Yeah.
Dan, what's your favorite automations?
All those high transaction, high volume ones. So the one that kind of really speaks to me is, as you mentioned, the credit card expenses. So something like a Wheel where it's a high volume, and not only there's a high volume, there's a high reliance on stakeholders outside of finance. It's very easy to depend on your finance team to get their work done. They generally always, every finance team I've been with can always get their work done that's required. Where the delays come from is when they rely on things from people that are outside of that one little particular department. You know, another one that's really important that I love to see is any sort of project management tool. If it's not inbuilt in the ERP that's managing that, you want to make sure that it connects automatically to your finance and your ERP system. So you're not manually making sure that time or project records are getting fed through to your ERP and your finance system. It's doing that all automatically. Any ERP worth their bread in the current day systems should be able to do that automatically without any sort of manual input.
Yeah, and like if anyone's using job costing at the moment, like Dan, you and I will list our kind of favorite job costings. Like for us, we use Xero Projects. You know, if anyone's got time and disbursement, Xero Projects is just simple, easy, and fantastic. You know, I'm a big fan of ProjectWorks out of New Zealand. It's works very well with Xero Payroll as well. I also like WorkGuru from a Brisbane business. They connect really well with Easy Bills and Xero. Very, very nice kind of connection of a system there, and really good for businesses with time, disbursements, and inventory. Dan, have you got any you know, job costing systems you've touched?
Pretty much this one that I've used is Scoro. It's a pretty slick interface that keeps your front end. So your salespeople, the people who are actually dealing with the clients, very happy because it's very clean interface that they can kind of figure it out on the fly.
Yeah, Scoro is great. Like that's a international. It's out of Estonia. It can go international as well, so you can do New Zealand, Singapore, Brussels, wherever you are. There's a good question from Travis on the call now about how to split staff members' wages between separate tracking categories in Xero. And we solve this at least once a month for a client. My recommendation is you've got to use a timesheet app or timesheet service. If I was doing that, I would be looking at Employment Hero. Employment Hero's ability for people to record time on different locations is so easy to set up and to control. And then the time costs automatically push into Xero tracking categories, so you get perfect divisional reporting. Travis, if you want a hand looking at Employment Hero, don't hesitate to reach out. I know that team really well, and we know that works. Systems like Deputy integrating with Xero, they work, but they don't split the time cost as well. So, and Sharon, to answer your question about Xero Projects, yes, you probably wouldn't use it for grants and budgeting and acquittals. I'd probably consider a tracking category for that one, unless you've got time. If you're doing time against grant process, yes, I would definitely do that. The time recording in Xero, Dan, do you want to give time recording in Xero projects a rating out of 10? Because you use it every day as well.
Like I said, for cheap and cheerful, it does the job for what you kind of need it to do if you've got relatively simple processes. But if you start getting a bit more sophisticated where reporting, that's probably when, when you need to record more sophisticated time entries with a lot of different activity types and whatnot, that's probably when it starts to fall over.
Agreed. And then the last one, it's actually a good lead. John, you've asked a question about managing intercompany transactions. And one of the sponsors of this whole series is Mayday. If you have multiple entities on Mayday, and if I'm talking two or more, multiple entities on Xero, 2 or more, 3 or more, we've just done 37 entities from MyOp to Xero, automated and integrated all their intercompany transactions using Mayday. It is a game changer. It is the best intercompany system I've seen. It does intercompany loan balancing, it does head office recharging, payroll recharging, and it's even got a special third function that if you've got a central credit card, you can allocate those expenses to other entities, which is just fantastic.
Yeah. And if you're, like I say, in terms of tips around intercompany transaction, it really depends on the ERP. So like I said, if you're using Xero, Mayday was life game changer. If you're using some of the more larger kind of ERPs out there, like NetSuite, Sage, all those kind of that mid-tier one, they generally have a lot of in-house kind of intercompany tools to be using. One tip I would have to add with that is that if you do use one of those systems, be very pedantic on your intercompany chart of accounts. The biggest problems you see right now in terms of intercompany breaking between entities is just that people don't manage their chart of accounts, their intercompany accounts very well. I always go with a one-to-one rule. If you're one entity with another entity, make sure you've got a pair of AP/AR that always matches. It's the best way to kind of reconcile it and make sure things don't go wrong.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just answer a couple of questions before our second last slide is, Employment Hero, does it integrate with SAP? It does not. You can automate a journal output very easily. So you can do a journal, but it's not a native integration, but it does integrate with like Microsoft Business Central, NetSuite with ease. And then we've also got a question there about NetSuite and coding of receipts and bank accounts. Emma, we do have some answers there. Dan's actually a silent NetSuite expert. If you hit up Dan, you've probably done over 20,000 receipt managements on NetSuite. Emma, if you hit up Daniel Fu on LinkedIn, he will give you as much advice as he can on his experience there, because it's not as easy as Xero.
Yep.
All right. If we hit that next slide.
I think there's one question from Andrea about matching income to expenses. So it probably comes back to that point around live reporting. So if we're in the days where it's, Power BI is able to pull live figures from live transactions from the ERP as of any point in time. Ideally, you're monitoring that on that day-to-day basis, similar to that example from Culture Kings where they've got a daily P&L. If you're having issues in terms of that, it could be because there's bottlenecks with your expenses. So if your income is coming through fine and you're having problems with your expenses or recording expenses or getting the expenses correctly in the right time, it could be because you're most probably having bottlenecks. So the wheel example being, you've got a whole bunch of staff with credit cards who they're just not giving you the expense, so you can't match those with the income side of things. Using tools like Wheel is a big kind of bridge to kind of cut that out. But you've got other things as well, like inventory. You've got
the inventory one kills me, man. Like I still struggle to match inventory and COGS against sales after working in retail for 20 years. The only system I know that matches sales and COGS really well for inventory is Deer, which is now renamed Sin7 Core. But Dan, I know you and I use that at 7 Miles.
Yeah, and a lot of ERPs as well. It depends on how you set up your ERPs, how you're coding them. It's weird, but like I say, a lot of the mid-tier ERPs are generally pretty good with it, but they do require like your warehousing staff that's releasing COGS to be keeping on top of their record keeping.
Yeah. All right. We've got 2 more slides. We're going to nail this easy. So the last one for here is about delegation. So if you're head of finance or a financial controller, or just, like a financial accountant, you've got a bookkeeper, right? And I know we had a question there about the makeup of the team before. And, like every team makeup has differences, different strengths, weaknesses, skill sets. So I always think here about playing to strengths. I think about, the people that are really good at high volume work, that at, repeatable work. We've got someone on our team named Raina who's amazingly fast at repeatable work. So she gets more of that, and I also ask my team about what does their ideal workday look like, and everyone needs to do a bit of churn, but like we need to be able to create environments where people can have a little bit of churn and then a little bit of push, so that means that the CFO or the head of finance is really able to operate as a C-suite executive. And we're just going to go to the next slide here, which is our kind of wrap up. Oh, actually, this is our visualization. This is my favorite. To really automate your month-end close, Dan and I always visualize our interconnected data. So I cannot express how important it is if you're going through a system change to try to visualize how the data flows, and especially if you're working with a larger team, like really trying to visualize how those go. If you're ever doing one of these, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help. Right. And now our last slide, which we've touched on everything, but everything in here we've actually talked about already. We're talking about, separate out the financial statements from your live reporting, so month-end reporting is that. We've talked a lot about mistakes versus perfection. We've talked a lot about, we haven't actually talked about timetables and month-end. But is there anything here that you want to touch on, Dan?
Probably from my perspective, in that people and planning perspective, like I said, in my experience, I've always find bottlenecks come from people who are outside of the finance team, stakeholders outside of it, creating, even if you don't have to monitor it all the time, creating a month-end timetable or plan just allows you to put your thoughts down on a page to be able to see where the issues are. And that's what I've always done in any new business that I've worked with, just so that I can see where everything is. When every month then you just reassess on how it went, what fell over, where the bottlenecks were, make a note of it. And those are the best times where you can kind of see, look, why don't we just cut out this process completely? Why don't we look for a new tool to solve this other solution? So get it out on a page. It just helps you visualize it. It helps you get going on something to work on.
And I'll do one more before I hand it back to you, Risha. Andrea asked, what does it mean to let cash drive the profit and loss? My absolute favorite one here is if you've got monthly expenses like rent, right? And someone gives you a rent expense that goes from the 15th to the 15th, I ask them to change it to the 1st to the 31st, and then I pay it on the 1st. So I let my cash in my bank do the P&L rather than me having to do expenses.
Guys, this has been incredibly invaluable. For me personally, I think the biggest takeaway is that finance teams tend to run lean. They're the last team in a company to grow. So it's really everyone's job on this call as an existing or future finance leader to defend your team's time. Their time is precious. And one of the great ways to do that is to have systems in place that create the path of least resistance for the rest of the company. Make it easy for them to get you guys what you need to do your jobs. I am conscious of time, so what I'm going to ask is that everyone who still has questions, please reach out to Tyler and Daniel on LinkedIn and ask them directly there. They will be really, really happy to answer you. And look, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for spending your day with us. And yeah, I look forward to kind of hearing more from you all.
Thank you. Good to be involved. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need a hand.
All right, smashing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for jumping on.
Bye.